Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Hi everyone.
Welcome, welcome. So good afternoon. We were just discussing the fact that it feels remarkably not that hot today, which is a bit of a curveball for us. But it's nice to see everybody joining us today. We've got a really packed agenda. And I am going to get straight into it. In fact, one thing I didn't check with everybody is, would you like me to share the slides, or Ben, are you going to do that?
I can do it if that's yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Hmm.
So, yes, hello everybody. We are going to do a little bit of just pause for thought, really, today's open meeting. We often do a huge update about the work that we've been doing at the National Retrofit Hub. But what we're going to do today is just look a little bit around ourselves. We're going to look back a little bit in time, and we're also going to look at what's happening in Europe with the one-stop shops, and just have a little making sure that we're looking around us to learn from what's happening that is successful and that has been successful, and to see what is it that we can do to adopt some of those learnings into program development today. So my name is Sarah. I am one of the co-directors at the National Retrofit Hub. We have nearly the whole team here today. And we have some guest speakers as well, who I'm going to introduce in a sec. Next slide, please, Ben. So the agenda for the day, we are going to also share a little bit of our analysis that we've been doing in the background on updating our State of the Nation data. We did a report that we published in 2024, which was our State of the Nation. And in that, we were really trying to explore what are the numbers, what's being delivered in retrofit, and what is that information and data telling us. So Rachel's going to take you through some really interesting graphs. That is our interim analysis. Then we're going to hear from Madeline Parker, our first guest speaker today, about learnings from the past, retrofit programs or renewal programs from the past. Then we're going to hear from, in the other order, we're going to hear from Jonathan Atkinson about Europe's one-stop shops, and then we're going to hear from Ian Preston about Kirklees warm zones, which I think is something that maybe lots of people on the call will be familiar with, but a really good practice case study. We're going to hear from our Rach Hayden then about a little bit about our Knowledge Hub and some other updates, which I won't name, so I don't get to steal her thunder on that one. And then we will just talk a little bit about what else is coming from our activity in the National Retrofit Hub. So I'm going to pass over to Rachel, and we will hear from her. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Ben, I might actually share my screen just so I
Sure.
don't have to do the annoying next screen, please. Next slide,
Sure thing.
please.
Yeah. Right.
Um, so here we go. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. You may remember, if you're a long time NRH participant, that a couple of years ago we published this report, the State of the Nation Review, which was delivered with Working Group 5, which was being chaired by Donald Brown and Alistair Mumford, with a lot of support from the team at Arup, where we looked at how much retrofit's actually being delivered, what's the state of the UK's homes, and also we did a lot of analysis on how the current grant funded schemes are being delivered, what's working well, what's not working so well. And from that came a series of projects which we're still working on today, including our measuring outcomes and impact evaluation project, and our focus on health. But we thought it might be a good idea to do a bit of an update on some of the numbers behind this to see, have things changed? And also, does this tell us where we should be sort of positioning our focus? So we're going to present to you a few of the numbers. It's a bit of interim analysis, which we haven't published just yet, but we thought it could give a good background to sort of some of the conversation that we're going to have today and some of the reasons why we are progressing with certain things that we are. So, how has the energy efficiency of our homes changed over time? So one of the things that we did was look at the English housing survey. So I guess big caveat here, some of this data is for England, some of it is for the whole of the UK. I've generally tried to include at the bottom where the data is relevant to. And the aspiration here is to expand it to be relevant to the whole of the UK. So you're seeing sort of as where we are at the moment with this. And you can see, the picture, it's not looking so bad when you look at it like this. 2014, 74% of homes were below an EPCC, whereas now we've got 44% of homes below a C. That feels like we're making some movements. Obviously, 44% of homes still needing to be upgraded just to meet government targets is a large proportion still. But this sort of shows a bit of a trend of poorer EPCs dropping and better EPCs rising. And that pattern follows through when you look at EPCs that are actually lodged each year. So that previous data was sort of for all the homes in the UK, what EPCs do they have at this moment in time? This is for each EPC that's actually being recorded on that year. What are people recording? And you can see again the same trend, that green line of the C really rising and the D slightly starting to taper off. However, we know that there are some limitations to this data. One of the big ones is that there are EPC data lags. EPCs are valid for 10 years, and you actually only need one on a home if you're about to buy or sell or rent a home out. EPCs cover about 60% of England's housing stock, so the rest of that data kind of gets extrapolated from that 60%. And really surprisingly, 31% of homes have actually never had an EPC, which means that essentially they were either last bought, sold, or rented before the EPC system came in. So we do have a bit of a, not necessarily a coverage of all of the homes. And we also know that an EPCC lodged now, or say 2020, will include any improvements made up to that date. So if you lodged an EPC in 2020, these might have included improvements in 2019, 2011, or even earlier than that. So we're not necessarily showing the improvement that's been made in those 10 years when we look at the figure from 2014 and the figure from 2024. Some of those improvements might have been made historically, but only just recently picked up. So yeah, as I said, that improvement, the 77% to the 44%, could have is very likely to have taken more than the 10 years that the sort of data initially seems to show. And also worth saying, the first set of data there is based on the English Housing Survey. That tests a relatively small sample of homes. I mean, it's a large number, but in the context of how many homes are in the UK, it's a relatively small sample. So you're extrapolating a lot of data there, which they obviously do using, a specific methodology, but you can't read as much into some of that data as you might want to. So maybe some slightly more useful data is looking at the insulation measures that are installed each year through grant funding schemes. So this is in combining Eco, LAD, HUG, Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, GBIS, and the Green Homes Grant Voucher. We want to add information from some of these Scottish and Welsh schemes into this to make it more comprehensive. And also worth saying, 2025, 2026, not all of the measures installed in those years will have been logged yet. So that dip at the end is just because of those not being lodged. But you can see, back in 2014, we had a massive spike of measures being installed, and some of those have very much been tapering off, particularly when we're looking at windows and doors, cavity wall insulation. Some of that will be because the market has been saturated. We've done a lot of cavity wall, but also some of it will have be because of the amount of funding going into the schemes and the amount that they're able to deliver. Also really interesting to look at, which schemes have been delivering the volume of insulation. So you can see that Eco has really been delivering the most measures installed compared to all of the other schemes. Now, this is number of insulation measures installed. It might be that with LAD, HUG and SDF, they're doing more expensive measures, they're spending more per home, they're doing more comprehensive retrofits. But it's still right to say that a hell of a lot of the work has gone through Eco. And this is really interesting at this moment as we see the scrappage of Eco. We're going to need to really ramp up delivery that's coming through other schemes and make sure that those models can deliver at a pace that we need while trying to mitigate some of the issues that we saw around quality within the tail end of that Eco scheme. Also, we wanted to look at low carbon technologies. Decarbonisation is a massive part of the retrofit picture. And so we've got some data here from the government's websites and also the MCS data dashboard, which if you're into data, really worth having a bit of a play with. You can tweak the dashboards and see lots of different types of installation data, which is really interesting. But you can see here, solar PV has been on the rise since 2016. Heat pumps are rising slightly. There's not loads of data on the amount of batteries that have been installed pre-2024 that we found, but they are starting to rise as well. But these are, relatively small numbers as well compared to the numbers of homes that we have. So putting that all together, we've sort of looked at the cumulative homes upgraded. So in orange, you've got how many homes have been upgraded by grant funding schemes. Purple is total insulation measures being installed. Now, of course, some homes will have had more than one insulation measure. Some homes will have had an upgrade that wasn't insulation. They might have had a new boiler. They might have had better controls, for example, on their heating system. And then green, there is the total low carbon technologies. So you see, we're getting almost towards the 3 million homes being upgraded through insulation and low carbon technologies. So how far have we got to go? So on the left here, we've got two different sort of targets we need to hit. We've got the EPCC target, and I mean, very open to the idea that EPCC is not necessarily the be all and end all. It's not saying that a home is going to be healthy and fit for the future and everything we need it to be, but this is the target that we have set into the legislation. You can see there in orange, that's that just over 11 million homes just in England that are below an EPCC that need to meet that target. And the light green is how many we've upgraded with grant funding since 2013. So a relatively small proportion being sort of upgraded through grant funding. So it really does show us that we need to sort of ramp up the amount of retrofit that we're doing in order to sort of tackle those homes. Heat decarbonisation is an even, I suppose, bigger challenge and picture of needing to ramp up what we're doing. So this is taking the assumption that every single UK home does need to be decarbonised at some point. There's a certain proportion that are projected to be connected to a heat network. They're shown in yellow. There are some homes that are already on a heat network in that light green, and there are a small amount of homes that already have a heat pump. But yeah, we've got this big sort of ambition to decarbonise the rest of these homes, the 24 million homes there that need to be individually decarbonised. So we've got really sort of important work to do in this space. Now, having said all this and showed you lots of numbers, we do think that there are some figures that are probably more important than these ones that showcase the real state of our homes and their impact on us as humans and residents. So what are the direct impacts? 11% of homes are in fuel poverty. The average household energy bill is just over £1,600. 13% of households unable to keep warm in the winter. And we know that the emissions from a gas boiler are a significant contributor to climate change. And we've all seen recently overheating is a huge challenge. In a 2-degree world, there's a report that estimates that 90% of our homes are at risk of overheating. And I think the last few weeks have made that completely believable. Who here has lived in a home that hasn't overheated? Probably some of you have passive houses. Be interesting to hear in the chat if anyone's living in a home that's remained a comfortable temperature for the last few weeks. Significant proportion of homes with damp and mold and failing the decent home standard. And also when we're thinking about water security, when we're thinking about water resilience, 1/5 of sewers still have combined sewage and rainwater, which really prevents our ability to sort of separate out and process that water in a less carbon intensive way, in a way that enables reclamation of water that can be reused. And then going on to look at the indirect impacts, the things that really influence people in the country. Nearly 400,000 people in England are homeless. More than 700,000 households are overcrowded. And that overcrowding and homelessness does not impact people equally. You're much more likely to live in an overcrowded household if you're from a less represented background. And these are the top 3, I guess, of social backgrounds or racial backgrounds that are most likely to be living in overcrowded homes. And then adding to all of that, this country right now, I think everyone's feeling it. It does feel quite divided. 84% of the public say that the country feels divided. And I think a lot of that comes from people feeling like they are living in, inequality, that they don't have enough to meet their needs. And the quality of our homes is a big influence on how people feel about their living standards and whether or not they feel like they're getting what they should out of the country. That's really compounded if you look at things like the inequalities in wealth. So the 50 richest families in the UK have a combined wealth of 466 billion. That's the same as the wealth of half of the UK population. And I suppose even more shockingly, someone who is from the most deprived decile has 19 years shorter healthy lifetime than someone from the least deprived decile. So there's real fundamental impacts that we're having on people's lives due to this inequality, due to the way that our homes affect our lives. Skills and jobs are also a big topic that we talk about all the time, but we can see that more than 14% of people are paid below the real living wage. And we know the construction industry is a particular risk of people being on lower wages in more stressful conditions, and having more challenges with mental health as well. So the picture here is that there are so many indirect impacts that we need to sort of tackle with our homes. We know that EPCC isn't far enough, but we also know that's an important milestone on our road to improving our homes. And we know that at the same time, we need to meet the decarbonisation agenda. So this is all shaping the way that we focus our work at the Hub, the projects that we work on, our embedding of equity into everything that we do, and also considering how we scale up while keeping really good quality work. So I'm going to leave it there.
Rachel,
And yes,
just before we pass to Madeline, I feel like that is really powerful, the way that you've set that out and presented it. And I feel that possibly of the 100 people in the room, just to build a little bit on what you said at the end, what does that mean for us? What does that mean for our work? What does that mean for our network? And I think the way you articulated it was really important. We're always going to be interested in the technology side. We're always going to be interested in statistically how we're performing. We're always going to be interested as a sector, not just ourselves. But what we can't continue to do is ignore the equity layer. And I think we've been pushing really hard since the beginning of our work to ensure that the need for equity in both the way data is gathered and what we do with it, in the pathways for communication and feedback to be brought through to our relationships in both governmental departments and across the industry, that those pathways are clear, because we're not going to be able, we know this and everybody knows this on the call, but just repeating it because I feel really driven by what you've laid out here. It's very vital for us to understand that without considering the fairness, the equity of this, where people sit in it, what people's lived experience is, then we are not going to get where we need to get to. And also, I think some of those stats that you shared about, the combined sewers and issues of wealth inequality, they're absolutely part and parcel of this. So for everybody listening, this informs the way in which we build out our programs of research with partners. It builds out how we build further relationships, who we're engaging with. So I think it's just important for us to underline that. And then I'll just speak to the one question in the chat that just came in. The sources for the stats, you'll see that Rachel had a watermark on all of our stats because this is interim analysis. It's quite a lot, and maybe you want to speak to this as well, Rachel. There's quite a lot of multiple statistical sources that have to be considered when trying to pull out what the message really is. So we have to be really careful with how we're presenting this information so that it isn't taken out of context. We will be ultimately republishing some information about our state of the nation that includes information around this data set, and in that there will be the sources published. But I think until we're at that point where we have gone through our checks and balances and checked everything out and made sure that it's telling the story we want to tell, we're not necessarily going to share that now. It's all publicly available data sets, by the way.
yeah,
It's not,
I can talk about it very briefly. So the
Mm.
first lot that you saw, so there's the English Housing Survey and the ONS data informing the EPC statistics, and then all the rest of the retrofit measures delivered are from the government's published statistics on Eco, Hug, and LAD, which are all available online. They publish annual, actually sometimes quarterly statistics for some of them on what's being published. You can download all of the Excel spreadsheets and have a lovely time combining all the numbers. For these ones here, I've actually got some of the references in the notes. So I'll see once I've stopped sharing, I might put some of the ones for these indirect impacts. I'll
Brilliant.
try and put in the chat.
Thank you very much. I just didn't want to
Mm. Yes.
simplify the vast amount of work and research that's been going on in the multiple data
Mm.
sets in the background. But yeah, thank
Perfect.
you so much, Rachel. That was
I'm going
brilliant.
to hand over. Yeah, I'm going to hand over now to Madeline. I think you're going to share screen yourself as well, Madeline. And I'm really, yeah, really intrigued to hear your presentation because I know you're starting to think about like how do we learn more from the past in order to influence how we do things well today. So yeah, please do go ahead.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And yeah, just that was a really really great look at the data and just the way that you explained the implications of that. I just fully agree with, and I think it's a good framing for what I will um, present in a moment. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So, yes, as Rachel said, I'm going to be presenting some research that I've done as part of my PhD at the Energy Demand Research Centre based at the University of Sussex on the history of what we might call retrofit today. It was called renewal in the 20th century, but generally home improvement in the UK, and how we've sort of tackled housing conditions, especially specifically private housing conditions, as a sort of policy problem in the past, and what we can learn about that, what we can take from that for the retrofit challenge today. So I think Rachel did a really brilliant job of covering it, the sort of recent context. And you know, we have made progress over the last 10 years, but I think as we saw in some of those slides, in terms of the grant funding schemes, eco and some of the local government schemes, we are sort of coming off a decade of under delivery. I think that we're all sort of in a moment where we're looking ahead to the next 5 years and thinking about scaling up and doing things differently with the end of eco. So you know, developing a greater role for local authorities, community organizations, hopefully as well, and area-based retrofit. So working in a place-based way. That's reflected in the Warm Homes Plan. We're looking at a new cross-tenure scheme, area-based scheme from 2028. Obviously, new standards for the private rented sector, MEES. And I think that we can sort of agree that there's a focus in the Warm Homes Plan on electrification. And this is sort of coming in the wake of the National Audit Office report on eco and sort of the revelations about quality in the supplier obligation scheme, which means that we're looking at overall a shift away from solid wall insulation. Not entirely, but I think there's definitely a focus there. And so looking at that policy context, just before I get into the history, I want to sort of think about some of the risks that I see with the Warm Homes Plan and where we're moving, especially around what Rachel sort of set out around equity and embedding equity into this agenda. So I think I'm not saying that all of these risks will come to pass. So these are just what I see as the sort of risks that we need to think about and hopefully address going forward. But yeah, I think there's a risk that we continue to miss homes that have wider repair needs. So homes that currently fail the decent home standard, or those that might meet minimum standards but still have repair needs before we can electrify or do a deeper fabric retrofit. Historically, retrofit schemes have been pretty poor at addressing disrepair, damp, mold. We've been quite laser focused on energy upgrades. And there are conversations happening around, you know, in the Warm Homes Plan team around this, but I think it's something that we really need to make sure that we address going forward. Speaking with colleagues at Generation Rent and other renters organizations, I think that there's still concern that the tenant protections around MEES are not necessarily adequate to prevent potential displacement and rent hikes. So thinking about how this lands on renters and sort of what that means for the I guess broader public legitimacy of this agenda, I think is something that we need to think about going forward. And then again, with this, with a focus on electrification, what we've seen to date with the universal schemes, so the boiler upgrade scheme, is that there has been higher take up from more affluent households, people whose homes are already sort of heat pump ready, and unfortunately. Reform and others have sort of seized on this as fuel for their narrative that net zero was for the better off. I think this is something that we obviously want to prevent. Obviously, net zero is still really popular with the public, but I think we need to take that risk seriously. So just to frame the history that I'm going to look back at, and I've talked about this in a couple of different places before, so apologies if you've heard this already. Hopefully it's still interesting. Yeah, and thinking through these risks, I think there's a lot we can learn from looking back at the history of state-funded home improvement. And really, I think the main takeaways here are that this is something that the government has been invested in doing for quite a long time. Retrofit has that name today, but this is really quite an enduring agenda. And basically, the condition of private housing in the UK has been an issue for quite a long time. So this started by local authorities sort of requiring private landlords to make repairs and add sort of basic amenities. So this agenda really started in the 1920s. But there was sort of a shift away from improving existing housing as the council house building agenda started to gather momentum. So sort of improving existing housing was sort of out of vogue for a couple of decades because it was sort of seen as benefiting slum landlords and sort of reinforcing existing spatial inequalities. But the focus really shifted back from the 1960s through the 70s and 80s as essentially a response to the growing public backlash over slum clearance programs. So, as many of you would know, the clearing of existing sort of poor quality private housing and replacement with council housing was, a major feature of housing policy in the 50s and 60s. But towards the end of the 60s, sort of public opposition to this really started to mount, sort of grassroots political movements. And basically government recognized that they would have to change tack to sort of maintain public legitimacy. And so they started really expanding subsidies for improving existing private housing. So this was anything from repairs to replacing roofs, windows, central heating, insulation. And what's I think really might really surprise us today is that these were universal grants. So anyone who could demonstrate that they had a repair need or lacked, an indoor toilet or a kitchen, I mean, that was still really common in the 60s and 70s, could get support to modernize their home. And so this was really a major policy program by the 1970s. So over that decade, more than 200,000 homes a year received grants for improvements across England and Wales. It happened in Scotland as well, but we don't have data for that period, unfortunately. That decade, the 70s and into the 80s, is also when we saw the first programs to support insulation, so what we would call retrofit today. This was in response to the energy crises of the 1970s, and conservation was sort of seen as the main, energy conservation was seen as the main response to that. So again, these grants were universal, anyone could get them, and by the end of the 80s, about 3 million homes had received loft insulation. This was also happening alongside the conversion of essentially all homes in the UK from town gas to natural gas. Again, largely coordinated by the government and publicly owned corporations. And so despite this very expansive agenda, there's one really interesting gap that I think has stayed with us to this day. So you'll notice that some of the photos that I've used look quite old. So I've sourced quite a lot of this information from the National Archives, as well as interviews with people working at the time in the 70s and 80s in local authorities. And there was one really interesting file of ministers in the Department of Energy and the Department of Environment, which handled housing at the time, writing letters to each other over a period of a couple of years and discussing whether to integrate renewal or sort of wider repair programs with these insulation programs. And eventually it was decided that they should be kept separate and that energy efficiency should be its own thing. And I think that separation has sort of persisted to today, and I think created a lot of the problems that we see with retrofit schemes not necessarily addressing disrepair or homes that fail those standards. So just before I sort of take us back to the implications from today, I think perhaps the most significant feature of these programs that we can learn from is how they coordinated work on a neighborhood level. So these programs are called housing action areas. They were introduced in the 70s, and they allowed local authorities to improve hundreds of homes at a time, working in areas that they deemed underserved or deprived. They were sort of given flexibility on how they set those criteria and which areas they declared. So on the right, you can see a map of Leicester from this period, and each of those boundaries is a different housing action area. I think what's really significant to take away for our work today and thinking about the new cross tenure scheme that's coming is how much public participation was actually emphasized in these schemes. So as I mentioned, they were sort of response from government to people feeling that government, hadn't been consulting them on some clearance schemes, and sort of a really top-down approach where there was very little participation, and this was sort of meant to address that. So the local government would encourage communities in these areas to really participate in the process. So form sort of neighborhood associations to essentially organize on behalf of their interests. They would interview every household in a scheme before deciding on design specifications. So there's really this emphasis on sort of civic participation. And then they also operated within a really strong system of tenant protections. So some of that was at the national level with the rent controls that existed at the time. But there were also tenant protections specific to these schemes that worked to prevent private renters from being negatively impacted. And I think also really notably, local authorities use these programs to acquire non-compliant private rented homes and convert them to social housing. So if a landlord didn't agree to participate in the scheme, local authorities had quite strong CPO powers and could acquire and convert homes and sort of expand their social housing stock that way. So I think a really central lesson of this history is that when we look at the type of homes that these schemes addressed, it was primarily the pre-1919 stock. So the sort of stock that we talk about today as hard to treat, difficult to decarbonize. And I think, and the photo that I have here is actually a photo from Leeds Council's Holbeck scheme, where they've, I think, really actually taken sort of direct inspiration from some of these programs in the 70s and 80s that really emphasized sort of improving whole terraces at a time, working in a really coordinated way, and I think really recognizing the unique challenges of the pre-1919 stock. And I think really we're unlikely to see much improvement in that stock. It's only 10% of it is insulated. Even fewer have heat pumps or are connected to district heating. And I think when we're thinking about our older housing stock, the case for this kind of neighborhood level coordination and sort of focus on repairs, not just energy upgrades, is really clear. Um, and I think as well, um, touching on what Rachel was talking about around how do we build and sort of sustain public support for this agenda is the opportunity to link it to other goals in the housing system that people care about. So expanding our supply of social housing, integrating this with stronger tenant protections to make sure that net zero doesn't sort of land as a burden on renters or other groups. Um, so I think that there are real opportunities here to sort of leverage retrofit to transform the housing system more widely, as well as make sure that our homes themselves are healthier and more resilient into the future. And so sort of taking a more holistic approach rather than just focusing purely on energy upgrades. So I've set out more of this history in this report, A Plan for Places, which came out earlier this year with Commonwealth. So if you're interested in reading more into the history and looking at sort of organization charts for city architects departments in the 1980s, if you're into that, feel free to check that out. And there are more recommendations in there on a sort of delivery model responding to this as well. But yeah, thank you for listening, and happy to. Do we want to do questions now, Rachel, or would we wait till the end?
I think we might wait till we see how time goes after the end of the other two presentations as well. And I'm sure there will be quite a lot of questions. So let's do it that way.
Okay, sounds good.
And I don't quite know what's happening, but a couple of people seem to be able to access a drawing tool and it's drawing on the screen for other people. So maybe if you can maybe not just do that just yet and or at all for the purposes of today. And yeah, Ben, do you want to reshare for Jonathan,
Yeah,
please?
can
Thank you
do.
so much. Very much. Yeah, thanks, Madeline. I think it's always so useful just to remember, like there's a lot of pragmatism in the case studies that you set forward, and I think it's really important to remember that in the way retrofit programs are delivered. Anyway, Jonathan, over to you, please. And Ben can flick on the slides as and when you need him to.
Great. Yeah, thanks very much. So, yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the EU perspective, the European Union perspective for retrofit or renovation, as they often call it. So if I slip into that terminology, that's why. And what I'm going to do is reflect on the policy environment and maybe compare and contrast to the UK, and then look specifically about the one-stop shop program. Also touching on some kind of real examples as well. Like, why am I qualified to do this? Well, I'm the business director at People Powered Retrofit, which is a one-stop shop based up in Manchester in the Northwest. But People Powered Retrofit have been historically part of a number of European projects. We're part of a network of European energy cooperatives with a citizen householder focus all across the EU. And we've been involved in two research and development projects, OSR Coop and Reno Coop, sorry, all the acronyms, but both are developing approaches to citizen-led one-stop shop and retrofit. And I've dropped a link in the chat just about that new project, Reno Coop, which is ongoing. That project, it's collaboration with renovation cooperatives from Belgium, from Spain, from Portugal, and France. And we were the week before last in Lisbon, and it was a project meeting, so we're talking to each other. But we were also invited to talk to the Portuguese equivalent of DESNZ, the agency, the energy agency running Retrofit in Portugal, to hear from our insights and our learning and what have you. So whilst I'll talk about the European context, I would highlight that the UK context is really valued in Europe, and obviously bigger from our own organization, but the other co-ops we work with really value our experience and expertise. So whilst there's good stuff happening there, they also do value the experience and delivery we have here. I'm going to talk, obviously we're a cooperative, not-for-profit, social enterprise, but I think that our experience is relevant to the whole sector, and I'll try and not make it all about, not-for-profits as we go. So second slide. Okay, so the policy environment in the European Union, I think the big thing, well, there is on the right hand side you can see what's termed as the renovation wave, which really was a response actually coming out of COVID, and a kind of build back better kind of response. And it's kind of iterated since then. I think there have been European wide kind of policy currents, especially around the war in Ukraine, peaking of energy prices. I think we see similar discussions around fabric versus renewable energy systems and all that sort of thing that we see in the UK. I think there was a big discussion around money into defense rather than money into energy and net zero more broadly. But certainly, I'd say, like, as things stand at the moment, there's a huge commitment to retrofit across the EU and the transition in more broadly. And there's a renewed a report around electrification that's just been published. But something that's kind of focused the whole kind of sector is the EPBD, the Energy Performance and Buildings Directive. That is a directive. It came out in 2024. What directives are their law, European level, but they need to be translated into national state law. So they directives to the nation states to deliver stuff, and they're really, really great frameworks for policy, really. I think the important thing about the EPBD is it's quite all-encompassing. So it's strategic, but it's also detailed as well. And there's quite a bit in there about new build and like standards for new build, but also a lot about emissions targets, both for new build and for existing buildings, and then things like solar PV integration and that sort of thing. It's the framework for the energy performance certificates, EPCs, framework for the EU. Obviously, it feels mad now, but our EPC, the reason we have an EPC and the framework around it, what came from Europe, it's a requirement, a directive to do that. And the progress we're making with HEM, home energy model, and the more granular data, more smart energy systems integration, this sort of thing, is mirrored across the EU. And indeed, we're involved in a bit around HEM, around validation of that. And there's a lot of coordination with the EU because similar countries are doing similar things, similar challenges. So yeah, the EPBD really does set the framework for what broader stuff. The other thing that I would highlight is there's a requirement now for all countries to bring in national retrofit plans or national renovation plans, which are kind of 10-year plans, which are really kind of robust approaches to retrofit and coordination. Yeah, really, really highlight that. I would also flag on a policy agenda. There is a lot of support for energy communities, which are cooperatives of citizens who can buy and sell energy together. So it's very analogous to community energy, but renovation, retrofit is a key part of that. And there's even support at an EU level for the creation of new retrofit cooperatives and that sort of thing. So at an EU level, there's a high level of support there. So if we go to the next slide, one of the most interesting things for me about the new EPBD is a focus on one-stop shops for retrofit. Now, this is one-stop shops are as the name suggests, a place that you can go to, or householders can go to, for advice and technical support around retrofit. And in essence, the ambition is for them to be end to end, like from just advice through to getting the works done, and you'd have a single partner to help you the way through. A lot of the policy work for this was done in the Republic of Ireland through testing and innovation and piloting of a program there. But that kind of model has been really taken up at an EU level now, and there's been a widespread adoption of it. And to such an extent that this new Energy Performance Directive, Buildings Directive, has like a requirement, and the requirement is that member states must establish at least one-stop shop per region, or one for every 80,000 inhabitants. So that's kind of it's a large town, I guess, or a mid-sized town. So there's a real ambition there to spread this model. And they're there to offer technical assistance and to simplify the home renovation process rather. And there's a requirement for those hubs to target all the different kind of actors involved, including individual householders, but also administrative authorities, local authorities, and SMEs and builders and that sort of thing. And what I would say is there's a huge kind of focus here on household demand and generating household demand, and like a single point where people can go to and they can have assurance around their kind of retrofit project and program, and what have you. And you can see on the right hand side there, I've shown there's a great report. Retrofit Works was involved in this from 2020, where I get a European report where they looked at different models, and there's a facilitation one at the top there, which is just offering a bit of advice, and a coordination one further down, which is around like not just advice but also coordination of different elements of the retrofit project. There's a great report there called Innovate, which has a lot more about one-stop shops, but there's also that came out 6 years ago, and now there's a lot more out there. So what's the landscape look like? Basically, each country has to take that directive and interpret it in their own way. And I suppose the key thing is that each has different regulatory landscape, or they might have grants, again, they kind of mirror our landscape, but there are definitely more grants there for people that have maybe it's not the poorest and most vulnerable, but not just them. There is kind of greater diversity, and there's more municipal grants, more local authority grants as well. One thing I should highlight on the left-hand side is the EU Peers Summit. You can see, but that's a summit attended in November last November in Brussels, and that is. The network there is huge, and it's like all the existing kind of one-stop shops are out there, and it's a network of kind of support, community of practice from across the European Union. British participants are welcome to join, and it's free to do so, and I'd really encourage it, to be honest. It's a great source of support. The majority of them are local authority run one-stop shops, maybe I'd say 50-60%. But there are a significant number of community cooperative ones, probably about a third of them, and then there's a smaller number of kind of commercial one-stop shops as well. So there is quite a diversity there, and there's as I said, there's kind of range of models there, from purely advice to assessments to all inclusive as well. A lot of the municipalities, a lot of the local authorities are just kind of focus on advice, and then they will kind of signpost on. I think one of the things about Madeline's report for Commonwealth is there's like an ambition there for local authorities to be more involved with delivery, and I think that's mirrored, I think, in the EU as well. But for the moment, a lot of them are just advice. And as I said, a lot of it is a bit about demand creation for householders. It's also a conduit for grants. When grants are delivered, they go through the one-stop shops as a requirement to get an assessment or get advice, or potentially quality assurance comes through, and consumer protection as well. It's a place that people can go to and check if things go wrong and what have you. They'll often it's not, things do vary, but the one-stop shops are rarely the contractors themselves, but they will work with contractors. The one exception being Ireland, where the one-stop shops are the contractors as well. So a bit of a compare and contrast between the EU and the UK. I'd say the EPBD and the wider policy context creates quite a cogent context. It's stable. The direction of travel has been the same for 10 years, maybe, and it's iterating and developing, but it's nothing new. You're not getting these shocks that you sometimes get here. And they're building, especially on the one-stop shop, on pilots and trials. So over time, you can see a policy agenda. You can be involved through trialing things, and you can be involved in then seeing that influence policy. Obviously, there's a balance between like the national and the pan-national, but I think there's a good level of setting a good framework at the European level, but allowing for national and regional diversity as part of that. And it enables experimentation and innovation. Indeed, that the projects we're doing are innovation projects. I'd say the one-stop shop programs on a national level are all at quite different stages. The Irish one is by far the most mature, but in Belgium they have a really stable one as well, and also in France as well. So like I said, the one in Portugal is very much at the starting point, I'd say overall it's very positive, but I think in some respects there is like over limitations in the delivery. So in Ireland, I think there is it's very, very contractor led, and I think that is a disadvantage to energy agencies and local authorities. But there you go. In the UK, I think it feels like our policy vision is a bit too fragmented. We don't have that long-term stability, and when new governments come in or new administrations, there's kind of a renewal and a kind of starting again, and that it requires a lot of kind of time. And I think there is an over centralization. There's a lot of discussion now about Warm Homes Agency. We need to be realistic about how much can be centralized and how much can be devolved. And if the Warm Home Agency is seen as doing everything, that's going to be at the detriment of local delivery. And it's unclear how a centralized system will kind of work, overly centralized anyway. For me, there's too much emphasis at the UK about online and digital solutions and not enough about these kind of bits where people meet one-to-one. And there's not a real cogent plan for demand generation, and we're not listening enough to the needs of householders in the development of policy. And I think you can see that at the EU level. I think it is challenging for a country the size of the UK to develop retrofit policy in isolation, and I think there's loads we can learn from the EU. The last slide. This is just quick, really. I think I really want to flag citizen-led renovation as a real kind of a very diverse and dynamic part of the sector as well. As I said, there's support at an EU level, but especially the partners we're working with, there's some great examples of innovating like new assessment products, combining data sets. There's building renovation passports as well. It's a huge part of this agenda. So yeah, I would really, my final thing is like, there's a lot of inspiration out there for organizations here in the UK of finding different ways of doing things, despite the variety like we can learn a lot, and I hope we will. And that's me. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, it is. I think it's just so useful and so important for us to do that, take that minute and look around to see what else is happening. And it's not new, but really vital insight about the long-term stability. And it's just, I think it's what we all yearn for here, just a little bit of consistency past a couple of years of political cycling. So yeah, definitely lots to take on there. I did share the link to that report, the Innovate report that you mentioned in the chat, so audience can have a listen to that. And just to mention as well, we had invited our friends in Ireland to come and give an overview of theirs today, but timings and holidays and different schedules didn't quite allow that to happen. But we will find a way to do that, because there is huge amounts of learning to be had from our closest neighbours, obviously I would say that, but it is it is a really excellent scheme. And it is developing, and they have edges. They know what they can do. They started with a contractor-led model for a reason, because it was what the skill set in the country was most prevalently made up of. And it is evolving, and it's extending to heritage homes, and it's extending grant types as well. And they're grappling with things like we're grappling with in terms of quality assurance, which Rachel could have a whole other hour-long conversation just today about that, and some of the work that we've been doing around trying to break down what a QA framework of success could look like. Anyway, thank you very much, Jonathan. And we're going to hand over to Ian Preston, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Kirklees Warm Zone scheme. And Ben, you've got the slides. So Ian, whenever you want to, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, you can move me on to the first slide. Thanks, Ben. Just a little bit about warm zones. They were originally an off-gem pilot, and a number of areas were selected to run these kind of local authority-wide, basically kind of energy efficiency programs that were meant to be a kind of integrated approach to tackling fuel poverty, focusing on particular areas. So I'm here as I worked on the external evaluation of the Warm Zones pilot for the Centre for Sustainable Energy. So that it's a long time ago now that these projects happened. They were in the sort of late so about 2008 the pilots ran.
Yeah, I should have dropped the date in there, Ian. I meant to put the year bracket. I think the different evaluation reports say something like 2007, 2011, but you know.
Yeah, so Kirklees was pretty successful. So they went on to kind of, after the pilot, have a longer lifespan of the project, which is what we're going to talk about here. Also, National Energy Action, NEA, set up Warm Zones CIC as a company, and they ran a lot of these warm zones as a big program. How did the warm zones work? Well, effectively, they kind of brought together funding from multiple pots, and that's how they were successful. So as it says there, they blended funding. So at the time, there was Warmfront, which was a grant program. There was CERT, the carbon emission reduction target. So it's a supplier obligation, and also council funding. So Kirklees was a particularly big project because the council had, I think, just over $1 million initially, which they put in. They then procured a kind of installer with, I think it was Scottish Power funding by the supplier obligation. But at the start of the project, they had a windfall because they sold off some land to the local airport. So in the end, they had about 13 million quid's worth of funding to run this warm zone, which was pretty big. I think it's key to say they targeted certain wards and areas. So it really was an area-based approach, that something that the government seems to have cycled back to now. And it worked because there was an offer for everyone. So they focused on owner occupiers because social housing in Kirklees was pretty good. I think a high average SAP of about 73, which is back then was like remarkably high. But they had an offer for absolutely everybody. So they would do things like make sure that everyone got a benefits check. There was like free carbon monoxide detectors, a fire safety check. So as well as the energy efficiency measures they were offering to households, they were offering this kind of wider package of support, so everybody could get something. And that benefits check, when we did the external evaluation of the program, had the biggest impact on fuel poverty, because that was gaining people thousands of pounds for a long period of time. Kirklees itself, this wasn't kind of like the first project that they had. Even when the pilot funding was announced and they were successful, they'd already been doing stuff for a number of years. And I guess that's a key point to make. Something that we've stressed with DESNZ, with the Warm Homes Plan. Often it's the usual suspects that kind of come forward and get funding for kind of retrofit programs. There are local authorities out there without capacity. There's one in our area in the southwest where the officer that would deal with this sort of stuff is also going to kind of care homes to kind of do support there in terms of their environmental health work. So yeah, that's the capacity of local authorities could be a key barrier for us. Do you want to move me on to the next slide? Thanks. As I mentioned, basically an offer for everybody. It's free cavity wall and loft insulation to all households. Back then, you could give away free energy efficient light bulbs, CFLs. So there were like those given away. There were heating systems, a lot of gas boiler upgrades. It's way before the time of heat pumps. Um, and yeah, there was also a kind of an offer for able to pay households. So fuel poor households, people that qualified for grant funding got it free, but they were also making sure that there was like a kind of discounted offer for everybody, and low interest loans for renewable technologies, which back then was pretty groundbreaking as well. There was a lot of support from all political parties across the council, and I think that's why you saw this kind of airport money that they this windfall they had got cycled into this project and not used elsewhere. So yeah, that long-term sort of commitment to improving the energy efficiency of the area, and the fact that there was a team in the council who'd been working on it and had senior officer support made a real difference. Do you want to sort of move me on to the next slides? So here's some kind of some sort of key stats and sort of statistics from the project. I think as well as the number of properties that they managed to sort of tackle and the amount of investment they got, it's worth highlighting. There was a University of Ulster evaluation of the Kirklees warm zone impact on well-being, which I'll put in the chat afterwards. I think what's noticeable about warm zones is even though it wasn't targeting people with a health need, it's still, the evaluation still found a health benefit. And there was also a wider evaluation of the whole warm zones of Warmfront, which was the government program at the time, which offered boilers and insulation. And the Warmfront evaluation showed a statistically significant impact on well-being. Again, not targeted at health, but it still made an impact. So the University of Ulster study looking at Kirklees warm zone found that for every pound that was invested, it basically recouped 36p in terms of the benefits for mental well-being and physical health. So we all know that this stuff, right? We know that improving the warmth in somebody's house has an impact on their health and well-being, but I think Kirklees warm zone is important because in 2011, when Christine Liddell and her team did that study, it was one of the first studies that actually demonstrated that energy efficiency was having a kind of a benefit to health that was, they were able to quantify in terms of money. Obviously, in terms of where we've got to now with like current policy, in the Warm Homes Plan, there was a mention that DNOs could have a role in helping to coordinate area-based activity. Ofgem's consulted on that, and now all the networks, the electricity networks, are trying to think about what they can do to support area-based retrofit programs. The Warm Homes Plan, when we eventually have a bit more detail, is going to have something on area-based activity. Warm zones was basically a street-by-street approach, targeting particular wards that had, high incidence of fuel poverty. It worked in partnership with like local organisations, community organisations. They used kind of village halls, or all of the sorts of stuff that I think many people on this call would be familiar with as a sort of way of getting footfall and kind of uptake in a community. So I guess it's interesting how things cycle round, and we've come back now to thinking that we need to be targeting areas, which I think probably is a good thing. It also was shown to have an increase in terms of local economic benefits from job creation. They did use a single contractor for the work, but over time, because it was a significant program over 3 or 4 years, they were able to sort of demonstrate that led to job creation and installers opening depots in the community. So yeah, I've sort of rattled along. I'll drop the University of Ulster evaluation in the chat as well. Um, so yeah,
Thanks,
I'm
Ian.
not sure I've got any more to add on
No,
that.
that's great. I also dropped the report in while you were chatting to try and save you one extra job while you were multitasking reporting as well. It is a really excellent scheme, and I was so pleased actually. Andrew, you've dropped in the chat that you used to live in Kirklees for the back end of that program and how impressed you are. So here you have some live feedback from something that has happened in the past that proves we are actually capable of delivering stuff that people can go, oh. That's actually pretty sensible. Quite like that. I'd be happy to like get involved with it and taking that place-based approach. I heard
Hmm.
some kind of anecdotal stuff as well about there was obviously some kind of copycatting going in from opportunistic contractors and a way to get across that was they like adopted like a branded kind of fleece that was the same color that everybody who was part of this scheme was able to be sort of very clearly identified, and by the time that each street had been, um, I suppose, engaged, if anybody wasn't quite sure the first time around, they did another pass at the street to see whether their neighbour's influence would have changed their opinion. And also taking a street by street, I think, where they had streets of different income deciles happening at the same time so that it wasn't all like one or the other, that it was sort of blended within itself as well to take a sort of a diverse approach. So it seems like there's lots of like smaller learnings from within sort of bigger components of learning that are possible there. Um, yes, and there's lots of other comments coming in about that. Well, some anyway. Thank you very much. I think what we could do is because I should have said to people think about some questions and drop them in the chat rather than trying to unmute everybody. There's too many people in the room. So while Rachel gives us the next bit of presentation, if anybody has any questions for our speakers, could you please put them in the chat and then we'll put them to the speakers on your behalf, if that's okay. So yeah, Rach Hayden, over to you. Would you like
Yes,
to just use your own screen share to show people things, if you would
I
like?
will do that.
Okay,
Let me
brilliant.
just check that. Is that working? Can you see the website?
Yes.
Yes.
Lovely, because I can't see that. I can just see all your lovely faces. Okay, so we first did read a development of the National Retrofit Hub website 3 years ago. And for anyone that's been involved in our work over that time, we have evolved a lot during that time. So when we just had maybe just a handful of slides explaining our purpose and who we were and how to get involved with our work, over time, importantly, our knowledge hub and the resources and articles that we host on our website have proved to be really valuable through the engagement that we get with our audience, which is across the whole sector. So we set about creating a new version of the website with a few different aims, really. One of those was to make it super clear who we are and how people can get involved with our work, and to consider all the different types of audiences that engage with us in order to do that. So you'll see, for example, on the website itself, even just within, about us, we even have put our own definition of retrofit, because we do have people that come to the website that might not be as heavily involved as some of you are. So we've gone back to, being really clear, if I go back to the homepage, on why we exist. And alongside that, the other key thing that we wanted to get across was really making it very easy for somebody to just navigate throughout our website and to find key documents within our knowledge hub, which I'll jump into in a minute. You'll see across the website as well, we've transitioned into, now we have a lot of photography that we can use from events we've been at, and photographers in our network that have kindly allowed us to use their images that they've taken at some of our events, to really show the key role that we play as that convening independent body working across all the different stakeholder groups. So let me take you, this is just to give you a little preview, but you'll be able to go and have a look yourself. But the place I'm really interested in showing you is our knowledge hub. And if I go into the resources here, which you can also jump into directly from the top and from lots of other pages. What we've done here is to try and make it much easier to find different types of resources. And there's a few ways you can do that. We've got a search. So if I put in, for example, EPC here, then there'll be lots of different articles that come up with which reference EPC within them. And I've just clicked on our roadmap for EPC reform as one example. And then you can download the resource and view the resource live on the page as well. Another way that you can also just click on that and it would bring you up with more, so you can actually read the full descriptions. And the other thing that I'm really pleased with is that we have a new filter as well. So if you're particularly interested in, for example, let's have a look at place-based retrofit as the project that Talisa and Rachel have been heavily involved in. And then that's showing me 3 of the key resource outputs that have been delivered as part of that project. And those filters exist in other areas as well, and the same search functionality. So really designed to really help people find all the different things that we've got available on here. And so we've showcased as well case studies, and case studies are case studies that we've curated within our resources that we've published, but we wanted to make it much easier for people to be able to find those. We've also got our webinars, so past webinars where people can access those recordings. And then the same with podcasts, where Rachel or Sarah have been involved in various podcasts. We've got links to those recordings. We've then got up and coming events. And if I go to news, because this isn't just news, this is really our blog as well. So we've got lots of different articles within here. And again, we've got that same search functionality, the same filter functionality. And something else that we've done for our partners and sponsors, so we work with, all of these wonderful organizations, and we couldn't exist without them, because as a community interest company, their support enables us to do the work that we do. And if I go to, I'm trying to think one that might already have some, so we've made these pages much clearer for our partners and sponsors of people that we're engaging with. And you'll see here that what will start to appear from those partners and sponsors as well is when they're involved with different resources with us, or they've got their own articles and things to share, they will start to appear on these pages too. And then the last thing I think I'll showcase is get involved. So people can click directly onto those. But also you'll see here now, if somebody wants to find out more or join a working group, they can do so directly through one of the forms on our website, which these ones take you to. And there is further information if anyone's interested specifically on individual working groups, cross-cutting themes, projects. If I just click on projects as one last example, what's happened there? It's bound to happen, isn't it? We've got a new website and then something's gone a little bit wonky. I was waiting for one thing, but you get the that bit's gone wonky up there. But really, this is just it enables you to read through all of the key projects that we're working on and click through to find out more about that project and to see any relevant resources or articles relating to that project as well. So
Great.
I will, that's just a whistle stop tour.
Yeah.
Please do go and have a look.
Yeah.
If you spot anything that's a bit wonky, as I call it, feel free to let me know. But most of it appears to be working beautifully.
It does, and huge shout out to Rach and Ben, who've been doing massive heavy lifting in the background, getting that updated. And it's and of course, please, all of you, visit it, have a look at it, see if you can find the things you want. Let us know. We always want to know what you think, because as Rachel said, I love feedback. We love to get the feedback, so it's really, really great. We have got a couple of questions in the chat that I'm going to have a pop at reading out to our speakers. And I'm sorry if I've missed any. There was quite a little bit of chat going on. And also I feel obliged to say that we have to be very careful because there were some not welcome guests in the Zoom chat trying to cause some trouble. So we had to make some removals to keep everybody else's experience safe. So we think that's really important. So we've got the first question. Hi, Matt. Great insights from Madeline. 100% agree that contemporary retrofit must integrate wider social and inclusivity goals. The narrow EPC-led approach that still prevails in private ownership cohort, 80% of dwellings, is evidently consistently failing to adequately address climate resilience, inequality, and enhanced holistic human outcomes. What are your thoughts on an appropriate support ecosystem that needs to, what are your thoughts on what an appropriate support ecosystem needs to look like for those of us addressing these environmentally and socially sustainable approaches focused around home upgrades? Always articulate, Matthew. Probably I stumbled over my words a little there, but it was addressed to you, Madeline. But any of our speakers want to come in and talk about that?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Jonathan and Ian. I mean, I'm in a sort of group right now trying to think about this, how to ensure that health outcomes and climate adaptation outcomes are sort of formalized and incorporated going forward. I don't have an answer on a sort of the ultimate framework for this, but I think that a good place to start actually is just integrating the existing HHSRS system into into retrofit schemes. So I mean, it's not perfect, but it is an existing way, method that local authorities use to assess health hazards in homes. So damp and mold, most often, but also overheating and excessive cold, sort of disrepair and safety hazards generally. And so I think just thinking about what already exists, I think that's a good place to start. In terms of integrating that, I've spoke to people working in the retrofit space before who hadn't really used the HHSRS, housing health safety rating system. And so yeah, I think there's work to do on sort of integrating that into our space.
Yeah, thanks, Madeline. Jonathan.
Yeah, I think people ask that about the EU context, and you do see a greater integration of these different agendas, I think, policy context. I also want to share some of the Greater Manchester experience, because obviously there's a lot of expectation with Burnham entering government next week. And it's interesting, over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been less about retrofit agenda and more about the good homes agenda. And good homes encapsulates a number of things, retrofit and renewal, as Madeline's talked about, and health as part of that, and then also about renters' rights. So again, it touches on the generation rent stuff that Madeline talked about. So, and I think it's a super important way to think about homes, because especially the renewal aspect is a cold, damp home is one that needs fixing and improving, and not just so that water doesn't come in or the wall doesn't fall down, but so that the home is holistically better indoor air quality, cheaper to run, and more environmental as well. So I think there is a holistic, hopefully, policy agenda coming.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. There's a question from Daniel Murphy. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for the details. To what degree is the Enerfit component step-by-step approach part of the solutions that could be undertaken in a one-stop shop approach in the UK?
Yeah, I think like the step-by-step approach, and also, I mean, past 2035 process standard, logical steps, through, is also reflected there. I think obviously Enerfit is like a very high standard in terms of energy performance, but the step-by-step approach offers kind of intermediary steps with that in terms of performance. But yeah, it's definitely process oriented. And I think it's about reflecting the diversity of needs and drivers and resources that are available to householders to enable them to find the solutions that they need for their homes.
Brilliant. Any final thoughts from our speakers? And then Ben, I think you also have something to ask our audience today, don't you? So while Ian, would you like to?
Only on the sort of climate resilience adaptation point, really. I guess it's something that we're sort of reviewing. Well, I guess a bit of soul searching with CSE about, because it's not really necessarily part of our mission at the moment. So I think it will potentially be more of our work in the future. We have responded to a number of consultations where we've, talked about shutters being a sort of an allowed planning development, or I can't remember the word for it. I was trying to think of. Yeah, PV's got special status, hasn't it? So you should be able to kind of install PV without full planning. So I think things like that, allowing some of the adaptation measures the same status in planning, because they're going to become more and more important. And the link to the Friends of the Earth ward summaries was really useful. I had a look at those. I didn't know about those, but increasingly nature-based solutions are going to be important. The amount of green space in cities, all of this is potentially going to be something that we're increasingly working on. So if we're doing area-based retrofit programs, it kind of makes sense to build in some nature-based solutions, which also bring kind of wider benefits to the communities themselves in terms of being a nice place to live. But yeah, sorry, a bit of a waffle, but there you go.
Yeah. No, thanks, Ian. Yeah, so Ben, unusually, would you like the last word?
Yeah, sure. So if you can see my screen, you might have seen from other webinars that we've started to ask for a bit of feedback, just so we can go forward and make sure that our webinars are more engaging, more relevant to you, our audience. And yeah, so we've just created a really short one for this webinar. It should only take a couple of minutes to fill out. So if you have a bit of spare time, if you could scan the QR code and just answer the few questions that we've got on there, it will help us to go forward and yeah, make our webinars more relevant to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. You can leave that slide up for a minute while people are popping off to go and get their lunch, and maybe they can see that. And the QR code we could share in a follow-up email out. So if anybody has had to run away quickly, that's okay. We can hopefully capture your feedback. But you can see how we really do take it on board, particularly how the work that Rach discussed in our website development and the way we're trying to make our resources available to you. So thanks very much. Thank you to all of our speakers. It's been a really great learning experience today. So Madeline, Ian and Jonathan, and of course Rachel at the start with all of those really incredible statistics and the analysis that we're starting to work on there. And to Rachel and Ben for the website updates. And we look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.